After 2 months travelling in Uruguay, Paraguay and northern Argentina, I joined the queue waiting to cross from La Quiaca in northern Argentina to Villazón in Bolivia. In the last 30 years, the infrastructure in Bolivia has been greatly modernised, such as this lovely new bus station in Villazón. There were several choices of bus company I could use to get to Tupiza. After a spectacular 2.5-hour bus journey, I eventually ended up at my chosen hotel in Tupiza. I particularly liked it because of the dorms with single beds rather than bunk beds. Tupiza lies in a spectacular setting surrounded by multicoloured desert mountains. Although you wouldn't think it was desert given the amount of rainfall that was taking place. I arrived in Tupiza just as the annual Dakar rally kicked off. For the day of the rally, the main north-south highway is closed to all traffic. In this picture, take a good look at the river there. A bit of water coming through, but not very much. Bear that in mind because a bit later I'm going to show that river in flood. For the local people, the rally is the biggest event of the year and is greatly enjoyed. With the Dakar rally gone, I headed off next day into the nearby desert, travelling in a tuk-tuk, known locally as a torito. This is the Valle de los Machos. These are the Machos. Rock formation said to look like a male penis. It's amazing the rough country that these little tiny vehicles can manage to drive through quite safely. They only have 3 small wheels, but they can manage the most appalling roads. On the edge of town, the rocks are extremely dry and there's no vegetation at all, not even cacti. For long distance journeys, the railways are still quite a popular means of transportation. This is the train from Villazón to Uyuni, arriving late one evening, just before dark. You can see how popular it is by the really packed platform. The train spends more than an hour there, and by the time it leaves, it's pitch dark. This is a shame, because the trip itself lies through some really amazing scenery, none of which you can see because there's no light. For local transport, I use the local bus. Here I'm heading towards the Quebrada de Palala with Enrique from Germany, who I met in my hostel. After spending all morning grazing in the Quebrada, this large herd of goats is being driven into a pen. This consists of thorn trees cut down and spread around to form an impenetrable barrier. And this is the house of the people who are doing the driving of the goats. Very, very basic. And typical of this part of Bolivia. Anything remotely edible has to be kept well clear of the goats. and so these corn stalks being dried have been put up in a hollow cut into the middle of a thorn tree, away from nibbling mouths. Most of the houses in this area are built of adobe bricks. Adobe is a mix of clay and straw and is dried in the sun, not kiln fired.
Ahora sale puro el adobe. Y pues pisar.
Sí, claro.
Sí, igual.
Ok, ahora.
Ah, sí, despacito, despacito. Es ahí sí una foto.
After being dried in the sun, the finished bricks are stacked and covered with straw for protection. Back to my favourite place, to the Quebrada Palala on the number 2 bus. The driver was very good at handing out change while still driving along. I'm walking along a dried up riverbed in the Quebrada Palala, just to the north of Tupiza. The riverbed itself is not very spectacular, but if I bring the camera up and then pan around to the right, you'll see there's some fairly spectacular rock formations typical of this area around Tupiza. Yeah, back to the riverbed. Actually, it's not really rock, it's a form of conglomerate. These shiny pebbles mixed in with a sort of clay material and very easily eroded, as we see here. Mid-January was a perfect time to see the large cacti with their beautiful white flowers. On a rainy afternoon, I took cover in one of the indoor markets. Much of the food is still served like this in sacks, much as it used to be years ago in Britain. A break in the rain enabled me to take a trip to the desert south of town. Very colourful, but also unfortunately, as we can see in a second, used as the local rubbish tip. Anyone for a tune? We're returning now to a picture you've already seen, the river on the day of the Dakar rally, about 2 weeks earlier. But after a night of continuous rain, this is what it looked like. Dangerously high, almost flooding over its banks, and very, very fast. The problem is, there's so little vegetation on the surrounding hills that there's nothing to hold the water back, and it flows unimpeded into the valleys. Quite a few of the local people turned out to see and film this rare event. With flooding of the town seemingly imminent, I decided it was a good time to continue my trip and buy a bus ticket to Potosí. Several hours after leaving Tupiza, after running through relatively warm, cactus-filled valleys, the bus climbed onto the high, desolate, rain-soaked Altiplano. Here we're climbing somewhere over 4,000 metres, 13,000 plus feet. Approaching Potosí, the road descends slightly past the famous Cerro Rico silver mine. In pouring rain, I managed to find a room in a small hotel, which turned out to be the same place as I'd stayed 40 years previously on my first trip to Bolivia. Potosí is very high. In fact, it's the highest city of its size in the world, at 4,600 metres, about 13,000 feet. Despite being in the tropics, Potosí, because of its altitude, is remarkably cold, especially at night, and everybody's well wrapped up. These villagers are selling flower petals to be scattered during a festival next day. Each evening, before it got dark, I headed up to my favourite place to eat, a chicken broster, spit roasted chicken with chips. Cheap and cheerful, but very tasty. Potosí is a World Heritage Site, and this is one of its finest buildings at night, the Mint, with one of the fine old churches behind. One of the main reasons for visiting Potosí is to take a tour in one of the privately run silver mines. Big deal, this company is run by a former miner. So I booked, along with 2 or 3 other people, to go out next day and take a look inside Cerro Rico, the mountain that we saw earlier from the bus. Our first stop on the tour next day was at this shop, where the miners come to buy supplies, the most important of which are these coca leaves, which they chew while working in the mine. The shop also sells various special food supplies, as well as sticks of dynamite. Before heading up to the mine, we stopped at a plant where the ore is processed. This is the ore itself, and this is where it's crushed. After being mixed with water, this process separates the heavy particles of silver from the dross. Back in the minibus, we headed off up towards the mine, over there. This is the mine itself, a small-scale outfit with just a few men working. This is me wearing the protective clothing supplied by the tour company. Living conditions up here are pretty harsh and basic. Inside there's a bed and also a kitchen. Finally, into the mine, which is a drift mine heading horizontally into the hillside. Being a small affair, the ore is brought out in barrows rather than a miniature railway.
Más rápido termines, más rápido a tu casa.
¿Qué pasa si ellos entran en la calidad?
Cuando la calidad es muy buena, un poquito los mineros recientemente un 100, 200 bolivianos más pueden mejorar el precio. Pero, como lo digo, no solamente es un... Sí, ¿quieres seguir ahora? Ya, cuidado que no pierdas después de detalle, ¿ya?
This little boy, being carried by his sister, almost certainly has only one destiny mapped out for him: to be a miner, because the mines are handed down from father to son, and this is their world. The experience left us plenty to think about as we made our helter-skelter way back down Potosí's steep, narrow streets. A last brief look at Potosí before heading off to Sucre.